The coat had a missing button at the collar. Nadia noticed it in the car, 3 minutes before she arrived, and decided it did not matter. She had other things to carry that night. A missing button was not one of them. The Ashgrove compound was already full when she pulled into the gravel lot. Cars lined both sides of the road, long, expensive ones, the kind that signaled rank before their owners ever stepped out. She parked at the far end, close to the tree line, and sat for a moment, with her hands still on the wheel. She was not nervous. She had moved past nervous 3 weeks ago, the night her brother Kieran stood at the head of the dinner table with 12 witnesses, and told her she was nothing. She had not argued with him. People expected that. The argument, the tears, the dramatic exit. What she gave them was quieter and, she suspected, much more unsettling. She set down her fork, finished her water, stood up, pushed her chair in neatly, and walked out of the room. She had not returned to that table since. She got out of the car. Inside, the compound's main hall had been transformed for the lunar convergence ceremony. It happened once every 10 years. Lanterns lined the ceiling in long amber rows. The floor had been cleared, 2 wide aisles running the length of the room, and people filled the space on either side like they had been arranged there, which in many ways they had. The alphas stood at the front, broad and certain, shoulders squared, each of them carrying the particular posture of men and women who have never been told to stand at the back. Their betas stood behind them, then the senior bloodline members, then the outer families, then the rest. Nadia found her place naturally. The back row, beside a support pillar, close enough to the exit that she could pretend her position was intentional. No one had put her there specifically. No one had needed to. The room had its own logic. She understood the logic. She had been understanding it since she was 16 years old. The afternoon the pack healer, a careful man who smelled like eucalyptus and moved like he was always bracing to deliver bad news, had handed her a form to sign. The emergence test had been silent. She had sat in that examination room and waited for the shift to answer from somewhere inside her, the way it was supposed to, the way it did for everyone else in her bloodline, and nothing had come. The healer had not been unkind. He had explained what the silence meant. She had signed the form. She had walked home alone. Wolfless. That was the word the pack used, though no one said it to her face anymore. They had found softer replacements over the years. She preferred the original. It was at least honest. She had worked the pack's medical records office for 5 years after that. She was good at her job, precise, thorough, quiet, in a way that made people forget she was in the room, which meant they said things in front of her that they would not have said otherwise. She had found discrepancies in bloodline documentation once, important ones, the kind that should have been investigated. She had filed them correctly and sent them up the chain. Nothing happened. She learned something from that, and she kept it. Kieran arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony began, and the room shifted to accommodate him, the way rooms always did. He was tall, well-dressed, their father's face arranged on a person who had not earned it. He had inherited the alpha title the way some people inherit furniture, without having chosen it, without it quite fitting, but carrying it around regardless because it was there. He found her eyes once across the room. He looked through her, not at her, through her, the way you look through a window when there is nothing interesting on the other side. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds, and then looked away first. Not because she had to, because she was tired, and he was not worth the energy, and there was tea being served at the far end of the room that she thought she might get before the ceremony started. She got the tea. It was good tea. That mattered. The sacred moonwolf was not a story. This was the thing outsiders never believed. People who heard the legends secondhand and filed them under mythology and moved on. It was not a symbol or a tradition or a representation of something else. It was an animal, ancient, territory-bonded, real in the way very old things are real, with a weight to their presence that younger things have not yet accumulated. It lived in the upper trail of the mountain beyond the compound. It came when it was called by the convergence, and it walked through the crowd, and it chose. Or it did not. There was no pattern anyone had successfully mapped. There was no preparation that worked. The elders had stopped trying to explain the selection logic 3 generations ago, and had arrived, reluctantly, at the conclusion that the moonwolf knew something they did not. and that was sufficient. No one alive had seen it choose twice. When it arrived at midnight, everyone felt it before they saw it. The lanterns did not flicker, the temperature did not drop. Nothing cinematic happened, but the room went inward, all at once, like every person present had taken the same breath and forgotten to release it. And then the great white shape came through the entrance at the far end of the hall, and Nadia understood why no living person had thought to describe it as beautiful. Beautiful was too small. It was large the way geological things are large, unhurried, without apology, taking up exactly the space it required. Its eyes were pale and had depth in them that made Nadia think of wells, the kind people lower lamps into, and the light still does not reach the bottom. It moved down the left aisle. The alphas straightened as it passed. One of the women near the front began to cry before it even reached her, not from sadness, just from the overwhelm of being that close to something that old. The moon wolf did not stop for her. It passed the first alpha, the second. Kieran was third in line, and Nadia watched her brother's chin lift by a degree, the unconscious adjustment of a man already composing his reaction to good news. The moon wolf passed him without slowing. It walked the full length of the hall. Then it turned. The room did not breathe. It walked back, past the betas, past the senior families, past the outer members, past Kieran again, who had composed his expression into something patient, something that said, "I understand," the drama of a long pause, very classic. The moon wolf did not look at him. It walked to the back of the room. It stopped in front of Nadia. She looked up at it. It looked at her. In the moment between those two things, she was aware of the missing button on her collar, and the tea she was still holding, and the particular quality of the silence that had fallen over 400 people, who had all stopped doing everything they were doing simultaneously. The moon wolf lowered its head. Then it went to its knees. Both forelimbs, slow and deliberate, onto the floor of the Ashgrove compound, before her, in front of every alpha, every beta, every senior bloodline member, every person who had ever looked through her like a window with nothing on the other side. It knelt. Knelt. Nobody spoke. That was the first thing. The comprehensive, absolute silence of a room full of people who had run out of the right framework to process what they were watching. The frameworks they had brought with them tonight, rank, bloodline, standing, worthiness, had just been set aside by something older than all of them combined, and nobody had a backup. Kieran's expression did something private and complicated, and then rearranged itself into blankness, like a man who has been handed a document he does not like, and is deciding, visibly, whether to accept that the document is real. The pack healer, the careful man with eucalyptus, and practiced sympathy, was staring at his own hands. Nadia noticed this. She noticed it the way you notice specific, small details when everything large has temporarily exceeded your capacity. The way your mind goes to something manageable when the unmanageable is happening right in front of you. She looked back at the moon wolf. It was still kneeling. It was waiting for something. She understood, without being told, that it was waiting for her. She reached out and placed her hand on its head. The fur was warm. That surprised her. Not the fact of it, but the degree of it. The living heat, the realness of the creature under her palm. She had half expected something ceremonial, something that felt like a symbol. This felt like an animal. An ancient, enormous, extraordinarily patient animal who had walked down a mountain at midnight to do a specific thing and was now doing it. It exhaled. The sound moved through the room the way pressure moves before a storm. Not loud, not dramatic, just present, in everyone's chest at once, like a frequency below hearing. And then something answered it. Inside Nadia. In the place that had been silent since she was 16, the place the healer had assessed as empty and handed her a form about, the place she had signed away with a pen that smelled like new plastic. Something answered back. It did not roar. It did not surge. It simply rose, the way water rises when you stop pushing it down, steady and unhurried, and entirely certain of its own nature. She did not cry. She did not look at Kieran. She stood there with her hand on the moon wolf's head and felt herself become, fully and without performance, what she had always been. The moon wolf rose after a moment and walked back the way it had come. No one moved to stop it. No one spoke as it left. The sound of its departure faded until the compound was just a room full of people standing in lantern light, blinking. Kieran spoke first. Of course he did. He used words like anomaly and further assessment needed and procedural review. He said them with great confidence to a room that had, quietly and completely, stopped listening to him. Not dramatically, not with visible contempt. The room simply redistributed its attention, the way a crowd turns towards something more interesting without discussing it. 3 alphas approached Nadia before she reached the exit. They did not approach her with challenges, or with the careful caution of people managing a situation. They approached her with lowered eyes, old manners, the kind of respect that does not have to be negotiated because it is simply, undeniably appropriate. She thanked them. She had been raised to be polite. She saw no reason to stop. The pack healer approached her last. He stood a few feet back, not quite meeting her eyes, holding himself with the specific posture of a man who has realized he made a significant error and is trying to locate the correct words for it. She waited. He did not find the words. She understood. There were no good ones, really, for signing away something that was always there. She did not make it harder for him than it already was, but she did not make it easier either. I will need to update the records, he said finally. Yes, she said. You will. She walked to the exit. The gravel lot was cold and quiet. Her car was where she had left it, at the far end by the tree line. She got in and sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel, the same as before, the mirror image of the beginning of the night. Except she was not the same as before. She considered this. She turned it over, examined it. People would expect her to feel triumphant, vindicated. She tried on both words and found they did not fit well. What she actually felt was tired in the way that comes after long effort, the tired that sits underneath relief, and underneath that, something warm and unshakable, something she had been carrying carefully for years without quite being able to name it. She had known what she was. She had always known, in the part of herself that does not negotiate with other people's versions of you. It was the only thing Kieran had never been able to touch, not at the dinner table, not with 12 witnesses, not with words that were specifically chosen to hollow her out. She had signed a form once, and she had learned to live in the space the form created, but the thing underneath had remained. The moon wolf had not given her anything. It had simply said, before everyone, what was already true. She started the car and drove. There was a small roadside place 20 minutes down the highway, the kind that stays open late without advertising it, with plastic chairs and a handwritten menu and tea that comes in large steel cups. She stopped there. She sat at a corner table and ordered tea and a small plate of biscuits and looked out the window at the road, which was dark and empty and going in both directions at once. The woman who brought the tea refilled her cup without being asked, 20 minutes later, without making eye contact or requiring thanks. Just set the pot down and went back to the counter. Nadia wrapped both hands around the cup and held it. Outside, the moon sat where it had always sat, steady, unconcerned, going about the long work of being itself without requiring anyone's permission or recognition. She had looked at it her whole life. She looked at it now, and it looked the same. Some things do not change because of what happens to them. She finished her tea. She paid at the counter, thanked the woman, and pushed the door open into the night air. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that is not empty but full of everything that had happened that night settling into its permanent shape, the shape it would hold from now on in the record of her life. She had not needed to be chosen to know what she was. But there was something, real, and human, and allowed, in having the room know it too. She drove the rest of the way home with the window cracked slightly open, cold air coming in at the edge of her face, the road pulling steadily beneath her, and the thing inside her awake and steady and entirely, quietly, her own.